Lady and gentlemen, tonight we embark upon a slow, velvety journey into the dim-lit chambers of the past. A place where whispers carry more power than armies, and little bottles hidden in sleeves decide the course of hearts. You might be expecting fire-breathing dragons or sword-swinging emperors, but, alas, you've wandered into a quieter story. One about secret recipes and powders of dubious origin. It is the history of love potions, concocted in kitchens, temples, and boudoirs, where women held a subtle and fragrant authority. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a day with some of these brews. Most of them tasted like a mistake in a pharmacy. Before we descend into this dreamy labyrinth, a gentle reminder: if you enjoy drifting off to peculiar tales like this, do click like, subscribe, and ring that ancient bell icon. It keeps this sleepy storyteller awake long enough to bring you more strange comforts. And while you're here, I'd love for you to whisper in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it in your night? You might find another listener dozing only a few streets away, or half a globe apart. We are all, after all, curled around the same glowing hearth of history. So lean back, close your eyes if you wish, and prepare to walk with me. Tonight, we glide along corridors of time, jars of spices rattling faintly, whispers brushing your ear like silk, and the faint perfume of long-forgotten flowers leading us deeper. You will not just hear the recipes, but see how women, with clever fingers and sharper eyes, stirred them into rituals of seduction. You will feel the slow sweep of a hand along a cheek, the tilt of a head illuminated by candlelight, the sly smile that turns a mere herb into a promise. The journey begins in the dust-colored lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, where the Sumerians measured time not in years, but in jars of honey and shadows of temple towers. Imagine, you are there, your sandals scraping over baked clay streets, your ears filled with the soft rumble of merchants bargaining for grain. Somewhere nearby, a young woman leans over a pottery jar. Honey drips like gold as she stirs it with crushed herbs. To the passerby, it is medicine. To her, it is something more daring, a potion meant to warm the blood of a man who has never yet looked her way. You see her later that evening, cloaked in a linen veil, carrying a small cup toward her chosen one. Her hands tremble only slightly. She offers it as though it were nothing more than refreshment. He takes it, curious, and she waits. Her fingers, slender and deliberate, brush his wrist as he lifts the cup. Her eyes do not leave his face. You notice the way she hovers a second too long, a practiced accident, as if her very presence is the true potion. The honeyed liquid coats his tongue, and his laughter softens, deepens, like stone warmed by sun. That is how it begins, not with lightning, not with thunder, but with small gestures amplified by imagination. You understand, as you watch, that these women knew how to let the potion be only half the spell. The other half was themselves. The whisper against a man's ear, the hand drifting lazily across the table until it rested, oh so naturally, against his. Now, do not picture seduction as a sudden storm. Here, in ancient Mesopotamia, it is a slow and steady river. A woman might lean close enough that he feels the faintest warmth of her breath. While her other hand adjusts a necklace she is not wearing crooked at all. He of course believes the honey is working, while she knows it is her gaze steady, unblinking, like a priestess who sees only him. You smile faintly, because the recipe is only half ingredients. The other half is theater, and she is the playwright of her own desire. As you wander deeper into this story, the city grows hushed. Torches flicker against mud brick walls, shadows fall long, and you realize something. Every culture, every time, had its own version of this same dance. Women bending recipes into rituals, men believing they were caught by chemistry, when really, they were caught by hands that lingered and eyes that gleamed. It is this blend, half herbal lore, half human art, that you will follow across the world tonight. So you take a breath, heavy with imagined honey and smoke, and step forward. Beyond Mesopotamia's dark alleys lies Egypt, Greece, Rome, and beyond. Each waiting with their jars, powders, and sly gestures, ready to show you that history is not only about battles and borders, it is about fingertips, grazing skin, about whispered incantations, disguised as sweet nothings, and about the eternal human hope that love true or brewed might just be one swallow away. And thus, with your heart lulled and your eyes growing heavy, you continue your gentle drift into the intoxicating gallery of secret recipes. The air around you grows thick with the fragrance of clay jars and fermenting honey. You wander through a dimly lit Sumerian storeroom, where amphorae line the walls like silent guards of forgotten secrets. Each vessel holds something: grain, beer, dates, but a few are marked with symbols, scratched by careful hands: a heart, a crescent moon, a simple line that looks like the profile of a woman. These are the containers of mixtures not meant for everyday trade. They are whispered recipes, half temple ritual, half mischievous experiment. You follow a woman named Enhedu, not the famous poet priestess, but an ordinary Sumerian who understands that honey is more than sweetness. It is memory preserved in amber, a liquid that lingers. She gathers herbs from the market: thyme, mint, a sliver of garlic, even a pinch of resin scraped from a cypress tree. To each she adds a spoonful of honey, stirring until the mixture shimmers like molten gold. The sound is soft, a sticky whisper as the spoon turns. Her intent is not hidden from you. She prepares this for a man she desires, a merchant who passes her stall each morning without stopping, his eyes fixed always on his ledgers. She is determined to make him see her, not just as another woman selling figs, but as someone who could set his heart burning. When the potion is ready, she pours it into a clay cup. That evening, she waits by the canals, where the air is heavy with reeds and fireflies. He approaches, distracted by his parchment notes. She offers the cup with both hands, a gesture of respect. "A gift," she says, her voice trembling like a harp string plucked too hard. He hesitates, then drinks. It is here you notice the real artistry. As he lowers the cup, she lets her fingers trail lightly along the rim of his palm, not withdrawing too soon. The contact lingers, a fleeting brush of warmth that speaks louder than words. His eyes lift toward hers, curious. She smiles faintly, lowering her lashes as though she has revealed something too daring to say aloud. The honey potion has done its part, but her hand has done more. Around them, the night grows thicker. The reeds sway, the water laps softly. She leans closer, under the guise of adjusting the cloth around her shoulders. Her perfume is not perfume at all, but the mingled scent of honey, mint, and skin warmed by the sun. He inhales it without realizing. You can almost hear her thoughts. Let him believe it is the mixture. Let him think it is the honey, not me. That is the brilliance. The potion gives her a mask, a story to hide behind. If he blushes, if he laughs too freely, she can say, "Ah, it must be the herbs." But deep inside, she knows it is her fingers on his hand, the tilt of her head, the softness of her gaze. Later, she might dare more. Perhaps she brushes an invisible speck of dust from his cheek, her fingertips sliding gently, deliberately, along his skin. He freezes, caught not by honey, but by the sudden awareness that she has chosen him. And she smiles again, the kind of smile that curls at one corner of the mouth, sly as the moon behind clouds. These women of Sumer knew what the clay tablets would never say outright. Potions were not magic until paired with touch, glance, breath. Without those, they were only strange drinks. But combined, they became theater, a performance staged for two, where the actor and the audience played their roles without ever naming them. You stand at a distance, listening to the quiet hum of the city around you. Dogs bark, reed boats glide on dark water, merchants count their silver by lantern light. Yet here, on this canal bank, a woman's hand brushing a man's cheek is more powerful than the laws of kings. Her honey mixture may last only a night, or perhaps a week, but the memory of that touch that will linger longer than honey itself. And so you drift onward, the scent of mint and honey clinging to your imagination. You realize that the first recipes of love were never just written on clay tablets. They were inscribed in gestures, in the choreography of closeness, in the subtle language of touch. And tonight, you are invited to read those lines, over and over, until they lull you into the rhythm of sleep. You leave the canals of Sumer and drift southward, following the slow swell of the Nile until the world grows warmer, brighter, and more perfumed. Egypt rises before you, temples gleaming with limestone, lotus blossoms scattered like stars on the river, and air thick with incense smoke. Here, love is not a mere flirtation of honey and herbs, it is ritual, divine, almost dangerous. You enter a dim chamber beneath a temple, where the air feels cooler than the desert outside. Lamps flicker along painted walls, gods watching you from their eternal poses. A priest grinds petals of blue lotus into a paste, mixing it with oil pressed from the seeds of myrrh. Beside him, a vessel holds something far less poetic, a pinch of crocodile dung, dried to dust, believed to ward off unwanted fertility or, depending on how it is whispered, to heighten a man's fire. He chants softly, each syllable rolling like the river. Nearby, a woman kneels, watching. Her name might be lost to time, but her intent is carved clearly on her face. She waits for the priest to pass her the oil, for this shimmering mixture to become her talisman. She does not plan to drink it, no, this is subtler. She will anoint herself with it, let it glide across her skin, let it breathe from her every movement. That evening, you find her in a courtyard garden. Moonlight falls through palm fronds, dappling her linen dress. She dips her fingers into a small alabaster jar and smooths the oil along her collarbone. Slowly, deliberately, she lets her hand wander upward, tracing the line of her throat, leaving behind a sheen that catches the light. She knows he is watching the scribe she has chosen, standing at the far edge of the garden with his tablet pressed nervously to his chest. She tilts her head back, as if lost in thought, though she is acutely aware of every movement. Her fingers trail higher, brushing against her cheek, as though wiping away dust. But her touch lingers longer than needed, stroking the line of her jaw, then sliding lightly toward her lips. The fragrance rises, lotus, resin, something earthy and forbidden beneath. He breathes it in and feels his chest tighten. Then she lowers her hand, only to smooth the oil again, this time along her wrist. When she gestures to him at last, waving him nearer with that perfumed hand, the gesture is casual, innocent. Yet when he comes, and she places her palm against his cheek, the oil glistens against his skin, leaving him marked, her spell written not on papyrus, but directly on his flesh. You watch his composure melt. The mixture is not truly magical, of course. The priests would admit as much if pressed. But the ritual, the way she applies it slowly, the way her hands wander across her own skin before finding his, that is the real enchantment. He convinces himself that the oil has slipped into his veins. She knows the truth. It is her touch, her gaze, her timing. Imagine the moment, her eyes glimmering, half-shadowed, her voice low as she speaks his name, her hands still resting lightly against his face. He forgets the temple prayers, forgets his tablet. All he knows is the warmth of her palm and the perfume that now clings to him, as though he has been chosen by the gods themselves. Later, when he lies awake, he will recall not the smell of crocodile dung thankfully subdued by lotus and myrrh, but the sight of her hand gliding along her throat, the shimmer of oil where her collarbone caught the moonlight, the sly curve of her smile as she touched him last. He will tell himself he was bewitched, when in truth, he was invited. The Egyptians understood this well. Perfume was never just fragrance. It was memory. It was presence. It was the invisible touch that lingered after the real one had gone. To wear a perfumed oil was to arm oneself with a weapon sharper than bronze, soft, slow, and far more devastating. And so, with the temple incense still curling in your nose, you drift onward, deeper into the scented halls of history. Each jar, each oil, each careful caress becomes part of the recipe, reminding you that love, in every age, is half chemistry, half choreography, and wholly human. The Nile recedes behind you like a dream of incense and shimmering oil, and when you next open your eyes, you are in Athens. The air is thick with laughter and wine, with the dry sweetness of figs and the sharp brine of oysters stacked high on clay platters. This is no temple chamber but a symposium, where couches line the floor in a horseshoe and men recline with cups balanced casually in their hands. Musicians pluck the kithara, flutes breathe gently, and the scent of roasting lamb drifts in from another room. Yet here, amid the chatter of philosophers and the clinking of kylixes, you notice the quieter theater unfolding. Women Hitiri companions move among the guests. They are not mere servants, but orchestrators of the evening, as skilled in wit as they are in allure. And as you follow them, you discover that the banquet itself is the potion. Every dish, every touch of a hand, is designed to stir more than hunger. A woman with dark curls leans over a guest, placing a fig in his palm. She does not drop it quickly but lets her fingers linger across his skin, soft as the down of the fruit itself. He laughs awkwardly, and she tilts her head, letting her curls brush against his arm. "Eat," she murmurs, and though the fig is ordinary, the way she watches him bite into it makes it taste like nectar stolen from the gods. Another woman, her robe dyed in saffron, approaches with a platter of oysters. She kneels low, offering them at eye level, and when the man takes one, she does not release the shell immediately. Instead, her fingers graze his as if reluctant to let go. He notices the faint salt clinging to her fingertips, and she smiles knowingly, as if to say the sea itself has kissed her hand. Wine flows freely. Cups are refilled before they are half empty. A woman pours for a guest, but instead of standing above him, she lowers herself until her shoulder brushes his chest. As she tilts the jug, her sleeve slips deliberately down, revealing skin scented faintly of rose oil. The wine splashes, and both laugh softly at the accident. She wipes the spill from his hand with a cloth, but her touch lingers long after the stain has gone. You realize now that these feasts are not about food. They are stages, each guest a willing audience, each woman an actress whose role is equal parts wit, beauty, and command. Their gestures are practiced but never stiff. A smile flickers too long, a hand rests too close, a glance darts away just quickly enough to invite pursuit. The men pretend they are conquered by oysters and figs, but in truth they are conquered by the choreography of touch and timing. One guest, already flushed with wine, leans too eagerly toward a woman who sits beside him. She pretends not to notice, continuing her song as she plucks at a lyre. But when he grows quiet, waiting, she allows her hand to brush across his knee, as if in rhythm to her music. The touch is brief, feather-light, yet enough to make his heart stumble in its rhythm. He is convinced he has been bewitched, though all she has done is chosen her moment with exquisite precision. In these symposiums, desire is not shouted but whispered. It is the look over the rim of a cup, the fingertips brushing a fig, the laugh that trails into silence a second too long. No scroll records these things. Historians may write about Plato's speeches or Aristophanes' jokes, but the true power of these gatherings lies in the unseen faint pressure of a hand against a wrist, the glimmer of eyes across a candlelit hall. As the night stretches on, the laughter softens, lamps burn lower, reclining bodies sink deeper into cushions. The Hitiri still move gracefully among them, now slower, gentler, their touches lighter, their voices lower. You see one pause at the side of a man drifting into sleep. She reaches down, brushing his hair back from his forehead, her fingers sliding lightly along his temple. He sighs, half dreaming already. She smiles faintly, like a priestess watching her spell take hold. And so you realize that the symposium itself is the potion. Figs, oysters, wine, they are ingredients, yes, but incomplete without the gestures, without the slow play of closeness. It is theater disguised as dinner, magic performed with laughter and candlelight. You lie back on one of the couches yourself, the air heavy with figs and wine, and close your eyes. Around you, voices blur into a warm hum, and the gentle brush of a hand across your wrist lingers long after the touch has gone. You are caught, too, in the spell of the banquet, lulled, warmed, and quietly enchanted. The banquet of Athens fades behind you, the laughter and figs dissolving like smoke. The hum of lyres quiets until the night itself feels hushed, as though waiting for a softer kind of story. You find yourself not in a real symposium, but in a place woven of myth, where the lines between history and imagination blur like watercolor bleeding on parchment. Here, You drift through the stories told by firelight and remembered in the poetry of bards. At the center of these myths stands Aphrodite, goddess of love, desire, and the art of persuasion. To mortals, her name was not just divine, it was shorthand for every inexplicable quickening of the pulse, every flush of cheeks, every secret glance across a crowded room, and, of course, every potion that promised to bind a heart. The tales say she carried a golden belt, embroidered with spells of attraction. Whoever wore it would become irresistible, their every gesture amplified into poetry. Imagine a simple smile turning into a tide, a mere touch of fingers becoming destiny. Mortals whispered that her power could be distilled, poured into cups, hidden in honey, scattered like perfume on a wrist. And so, across the Greek world, potions were brewed in her name. One story tells of a shepherdess, too plain to be noticed by the man she adored. She prayed at Aphrodite's altar, leaving offerings of apples and little carved doves. That night, she dreamed of the goddess, who pressed a vial of shimmering liquid into her hand. When she awoke, there was no vial, but she remembered the recipe: crushed roses, a drop of honey, and the dew gathered from the first morning of spring. She brewed it, trembling, and offered it to him as a drink. The tale says that as he sipped, her courage grew. She touched his cheek lightly, as though brushing away a strand of hair, her hand lingering just long enough for him to meet her eyes. And in that moment, whether it was the potion or her trembling boldness, he smiled at her as though for the first time. The myth does not say if their love lasted, only that her hand lingered, and for one night, she believed herself beloved. Another myth circles around Helen of Troy. Some said she never needed a potion, her beauty was its own spell. But others whispered that her nurse, fearing Helen's heart would stray, gave her a drink infused with herbs, sacred to Aphrodite. The nurse stirred it carefully, muttering prayers, while Helen dipped her finger into the mixture and touched it to her lips. They say when Paris first saw her afterward, it was not merely Helen he saw, but every dream of desire he had ever carried, given form in her smile. Was it magic, or was it the way she tilted her head, her eyes glimmering as she leaned closer, letting her hand rest against his arm as though she had always belonged there? You drift further into the web of stories. One lover sprinkles drops of oil upon his skin, claiming Aphrodite taught him the recipe: cinnamon, myrrh, and the faintest trace of bitter almond. He enters the chamber of his beloved, who wrinkles her nose at the sharp scent, yet when he takes her hand, pressing his lips against the back of it, she feels the warmth linger long after the kiss has ended. Was it the potion, or the devotion with which he bent before her? The poets always leave that question unanswered. They describe the liquid, the herbs, the shimmering glow of oil poured into lamps. But the heart of the story is always a gesture, the brushing of fingertips against a wrist, the sweep of a hand across a cheek, the leaning close so that breath mingles with breath. Aphrodite's potions, it seems, are less recipes and more excuses for courage. You pause in this mythical place, listening. The night hums with crickets, the stars lean close, and the goddess herself seems to whisper, "The potion is never enough, is the way you touch, the way you linger, the way you dare." So you continue, carrying with you not just the recipes of roses and honey, but the memory of trembling hands and bold glances. For in the myths of Aphrodite, every potion is only half alchemy. The other half is the human heart, daring to reach across the space between two souls. The myths dissolve into daylight, and you find yourself wandering along the stone-paved streets of Rome. The air hums with noise, vendors shouting, wheels clattering, fountains spilling water into worn basins. Yet behind closed doors, past the marble columns of townhouses, another kind of noise lingers: the grinding of herbs, the bubbling of copper pots, the whispered laughter of women who understand that recipes can be more dangerous than daggers. You step into one of these kitchens, tiled in red and white, its counters cluttered with amphorae and baskets. A woman bends over a mortar, her bracelets chiming softly as she pounds dried herbs into powder. Mint, fennel, a little wild celery, all blended with honey. Into the wine they go, turning the liquid cloudy, fragrant. She stirs, humming to herself, while another woman watches the doorway nervously. These mixtures, after all, could be read two ways, as acts of devotion or as rebellion. The Romans loved their wine, and they loved their games. A banquet might stretch for hours. Guests sprawled on couches, servants darting like shadows. And in these endless evenings, a woman might slip her chosen cup across the table, the potion hidden beneath the red swirl of Falernian. You imagine the scene. She offers the cup with a smile that is just shy of modest, her eyes lowered. He takes it, laughing, unaware. And as he drinks, she leans closer, her hand sliding across the couch until her fingertips rest lightly against his arm. At first, he thinks nothing of it. Then the warmth of the wine deepens, thickening in his chest. He turns, and she is already watching him, her lips curved in that half-smile the poets describe as Venus' secret. She does not speak. Instead, she lets her fingers travel upward, tracing the line of his sleeve, gliding toward his wrist, as though she means to take his pulse. His heart pounds beneath her touch. You recall how earlier, in Sumer and Greece, women used honey and figs. But here in Rome, it is wine. Every banquet a stage, every amphora a vessel of potential enchantment. And yet, the potion itself is rarely the magic. It is the way she holds his gaze, steady and unblinking, as he swallows. It is the way she lets her hand linger, withdrawing only when his breath catches. Some women used these recipes to entice husbands who strayed. A few, more daring, to bend powerful men toward their causes. And others still, those whispered about in gossip. Mixed herbs not for attraction but for freedom, brews that dulled desire, or ended it altogether. History records accusations, trials, even rebellions. Women gathering secretly, sharing recipes, standing against a world that often bound them too tightly. Each jar of powder, each vial of oil, was both an instrument of love and a potential weapon of defiance. Picture, for a moment, one woman in a villa, overlooking the Tiber. She has been ignored for months, her husband's eyes fixed on politics and gladiators. Tonight, though, she prepares carefully. She oils her hair with rosemary, perfumes her wrists with myrtle, and mixes into his wine a few drops of a potion taught by her nurse. When she enters the triclinium, she moves slowly, each step measured. She kneels to pour the wine, but before handing the cup, she lets her fingers trace the rim, as though sealing it with her touch. He drinks, careless, and leans back. She sits beside him, closer than usual. Her hand rests on his knee, the gesture half bold, half tender. When he glances at her in surprise, she tilts her head, letting her hair fall forward, brushing against his arm. She murmurs a question about his day, about the games, but her voice is low, carrying warmth. The potion may spark something in his blood, but it is her closeness, her touch, her patience, that turns his eyes toward her again. And so you see the pattern repeating across time. The herbs are only the excuse. The real magic lies in how a woman dares to lean nearer, to brush her fingers along a man's cheek, to smile as though the gods themselves had granted her secret power. Rome is no different from Sumer, or Egypt, or Greece. Every potion is half science, half theater. As you step back into the Roman streets, the noise swells again, wheels rattling, fountains singing, children chasing one another across stones. Yet behind the noise, you carry with you the image of a hand on a cup, a touch lingering on an arm, and the knowledge that in kitchens and banquet halls alike, love was always part recipe, part rebellion. You leave the marble halls of Rome behind, and with them the taste of wine laced with honey and herbs. The world grows darker, colder. Stone villas give way to wooden huts, torchlight to flickering hearth fires, banquets to whispered meetings in shadowed kitchens. The centuries shift like a cloak settling over your shoulders, and you now find yourself in a medieval village where suspicion lingers heavier than smoke. Here, women who mix too many herbs, who know too many recipes, are called witches. The cottage you enter smells of damp earth, rosemary hanging from rafters, and a pot bubbling with something thicker than stew. An old woman stirs it with a wooden spoon, muttering under her breath. Around her neck, a pouch of dried herbs swings as she moves. She looks ordinary wrinkled hands. Woolen shawl, but the villagers outside whisper that her brews can bend a man's heart, like willow in the wind. You watch her grind roots into a paste, adding them to the pot with a hiss of steam. Mugwort, sage, wild thyme, and a pinch of salt from the sea. Into the bubbling mix, she drops a strip of apple peel, murmuring words too soft to catch. She is not making poison. She is making longing a drink for a girl too shy to speak her heart, a charm for a wife whose husband has grown cold. The girl comes at dusk, shawl pulled tight, eyes wide with fear and hope. She trades a basket of eggs for a vial of the brew. The old woman hands it over without ceremony, warning only, "It works best when you are brave." That night you follow the girl as she creeps into her father's barn, where the boy she adores tends the animals. She offers him the flask. He laughs, suspicious, but drinks anyway. She waits, heart racing. Then, instead of retreating, she takes a step closer. Her hand lifts, hesitant at first, then sure, brushing against his cheek as if to test the truth of the potion. Her fingers linger there, soft and trembling. His laughter fades. He looks at her differently, not because of the herbs, perhaps, but because her touch carries a confidence she has never shown before. And this, you realize, is the heart of every so-called witch's brew. The potion is only half the spell. The other half is the courage it gives to the hand that dares to caress, the lips that dare to smile, the body that dares to stand closer. The herbs are an excuse, a shield. "It wasn't me," the girl can say, "it was the potion." But deep inside, she knows it was the moment her fingers slid gently along his skin. The way she tilted her head toward him, the way her eyes lingered like a secret flame. Not all stories end so sweetly. Some women who brewed such mixtures were dragged before courts, accused of witchcraft, a neighbor's jealousy, a lover's scorn, a rival's envy. Any of these could twist kindness into danger. But even in the records of their trials, hidden beneath the accusations, you find the same details: a vial of herbs, a whispered word, a woman daring to touch when society said she must not. Picture another scene: a nobleman, pale with illness of the heart, is brought a healing draught by a woman his family mistrusts. She kneels beside his bed, holding the cup, but before he drinks, she dips her fingers into the liquid and brushes them lightly along his lips. The gesture is soft, almost reverent. He shivers not from the potion, but from her nearness, from the intimacy of the act itself. His family calls it witchcraft. He calls it a cure. You linger in these smoky cottages, watching hands stir cauldrons, watching fingers graze cheeks and wrists, watching the way desire is blamed on herbs, when in truth it is born of touch. Outside, the villagers mutter, but inside, in the dim glow of the fire, women continue to brew courage into bottles, to bottle courage into gestures, to remind you that love, however forbidden, always finds a way. The smoky cottages of Europe fade away, and you travel eastward, where the air grows warmer, sweet with cardamom and cloves. You find yourself in the bustling markets of ancient India, where baskets overflow with saffron threads finer than silk, where pepper and cinnamon are measured like treasure, and where the Kama Sutra whispers from behind carved doors about the delicate art of love. Here, potions are not merely brews of secrecy, but celebrated tonics, taught openly, as part of life's great pleasures. The kitchens themselves feel like laboratories of desire. A brass pan simmers over the fire, milk swirling with strands of saffron that bleed golden into the froth. Into this, a woman stirs honey, ginger, a pinch of black pepper, and powdered almond. The mixture glows as though the fire itself has poured its soul into the cup. She lifts the pan and pours it into 2 bronze cups, steam curling upward like incense. Tonight, she prepares it not for herself but for her husband, a merchant weary from long travels. He arrives home dust-stained, his eyes heavy with fatigue. But she meets him at the threshold with a smile that softens his exhaustion. They sit together, and she offers him the cup. He takes it, but before he drinks, she dips her finger into the froth and traces a circle on his wrist. humming softly, as if completing a ritual. He shivers not from the spice, but from her gentle touch gliding along his skin. Only then does he sip, the flavors blooming across his tongue. Sweet honey, sharp pepper, the warmth of saffron unfurling through his body like sunrise. She watches him drink, leaning a little closer, her shoulder brushing his as if by accident. The scent of her hair mingles with the steam, perfumed by jasmine oil she pressed into it earlier. When he glances at her, she lifts her own cup, touches it to her lips, and then, deliberately, lets her gaze linger on him over the rim. The potion works not through saffron or pepper, but through the art of timing. The brush of her shoulder, the glimmer in her eyes, the finger tracing his wrist. Later, when the cups are empty, she sets hers aside and places her hand gently on his chest. Her palm rests there for a heartbeat, then slides slowly upward to his throat, her thumb brushing his jaw. She murmurs words he barely understands, a mantra, perhaps, or maybe only his name spoken like a blessing. He feels the warmth of saffron in his veins, but it is her hand that anchors the heat. These calm-inspired tonics were not kept in secret. Texts describe them openly. Milk spiced with cardamom for vitality, honey mixed with black pepper for fire, saffron to awaken joy. Yet none of these instructions mention the gestures that accompany them, the way a woman tilts her head, the softness of her fingers against a cheek, the moment when her laughter falls into silence, and her touch fills the space instead. Without these, the recipes are only drinks. With them, they are symphonies. You drift through another scene. A young bride, shy and uncertain, is taught by her elder sister how to prepare the tonic. The sister whispers, "Add the saffron at the end, so the color stays bright. Stir clockwise, always clockwise." But more importantly, she shows her how to serve it. "Hold the cup with both hands," she says, "so when you offer it, your fingers brush his." She demonstrates, her hands gliding across the air, delicate, precise. The bride nods, blushing, understanding that the potion is less about what simmers in the pan, and more about what lingers in the space between two bodies. As you watch, you begin to realize something that has followed you from Sumer to Greece, Rome, and now India. The recipe is only the canvas. The true painting is in the way hands move, in the way voices soften, in the way eyes meet and do not look away. The Kama Sutra itself teaches not just positions of the body, but positions of the soul. And these tonics are part of that greater philosophy. Desire is art, touch is poetry. You leave the fragrant kitchen, stepping into the night air rich with jasmine and sandalwood. In your mind lingers the image of saffron threads dissolving into golden milk, and of a woman's hand sliding gently across her husband's cheek as though completing a mantra only she can recite. And you realize that here, in the heart of India, love potions are less secrets than invitations, steaming cups of courage and tenderness, offered with steady hands and whispered words. The warmth of saffron and pepper drifts away like steam, and you find yourself in another world, cool mist-veiled mountains rising in the distance, bamboo rustling in the evening breeze, and the faint chiming of bells from a Taoist monastery. You are in ancient China, where alchemists and physicians alike believed that love, like health, could be balanced through careful mixtures. Their tonics were not only about desire, but about harmony, about ensuring that two souls moved as one. You enter a chamber lined with scrolls and wooden shelves heavy with jars. The air smells of herbs, sharp ginseng, earthy ramania root, sweet chrysanthemum petals drying in baskets. At the center, a bronze cauldron warms over coals, and an alchemist stirs slowly, chanting under his breath. Into the brew he drops powdered deer antler, said to restore vigor, and slices of ginseng, believed to awaken both body and spirit. The mixture glows faintly amber in the firelight. But as much as these recipes belonged to learned men, they lived also in the hands of women who adapted them in quieter, subtler ways. You follow one such woman, a scholar's wife, who prepares a potion of harmony for herself and her husband. She boils water with ginger and longan fruit, then adds drops of the stronger elixir ginseng tincture the physician sold her. The aroma rises, warm and sweet, carrying the promise of balance. When her husband returns, weary from hours bent over scrolls, she greets him not with words, but with the cup itself. She presses it into his hands, her fingers lingering along his knuckles just a little too long. As he drinks, she sits close, her silk sleeve brushing against his arm. He swallows, then lowers the cup, only to find her already watching him, her eyes steady as a lake under moonlight. She takes the cup back and tips the last drops onto her palm. Slowly, deliberately, she smooths the liquid along her neck, just below her ear. The gesture is simple, but the effect is not. His gaze follows the line of her hand, and when she lowers it, she lets her fingertips trail against his cheek, leaving behind a faint sheen of warmth and fragrance. He closes his eyes at the touch, feeling more than any elixir could provide. It is in these gestures, you realize, that the potion finds its true strength. The herbs may restore his energy, but it is her hand that restores his attention. The ginseng may quicken his pulse, but it is her touch along his jaw that makes his breath falter. Harmony is not poured from a bottle, it is written in the space between two bodies. In the way she leans just close enough that her hair brushes his shoulder, in the way she lowers her voice until it trembles like a whisper of silk. In the stories that survive, some women even painted their lips with the elixirs, pressing them gently against their husbands' foreheads as blessings. Others dabbed tinctures onto their fingertips, then traced slow, deliberate patterns across a man's chest, as though drawing characters only he could decipher. To outsiders, these were medicines. To those who shared them, they were love letters written in touch. You picture one such evening, a courtyard garden, lanterns glowing softly, crickets singing in the shadows. A wife and her husband sit together, the elixir steaming between them. She reaches for his hand, not grasping it outright, but letting her fingers wander across the back of it, circling lazily, tracing the veins as though mapping a river. He laughs nervously, claiming the ginseng must be working already, but she only smiles, knowing it is not the roots but her touch that makes his cheeks warm. Chinese philosophy spoke often of yin and yang, balance and union. These elixirs, like the gestures that accompanied them, were embodiments of that idea. The potion might quicken the yang, the fiery energy, but the woman's gentle touch anchored it with yin. The soft and receptive together, they formed harmony, not just in body, but in presence, in the way they leaned toward one another, in the way silence filled with meaning. As the night deepens, you leave the scholar's house, the faint scent of ginseng still on the air. Behind you, laughter stirs quiet, intimate, the laughter of two people rediscovering one another. And you understand that in China, the elixir was never about conquest or rebellion. It was about balance, about restoring what time or distance had worn away. The potion was the excuse, the touch was the truth, and harmony was the gift. The mountain air of China fades into sea breeze, and soon you are stepping through lantern-lit streets, where wooden facades gleam with fresh lacquer and paper. Lanterns glow like captured moons. You are in Edo period, Japan. Wandering through the yaikaku, the licensed quarters where courtesans turned the art of allure into a profession more disciplined than any samurai's training. The air smells faintly of clove, cinnamon, and incense burned at every threshold. You follow a courtesan into her chamber, its tatami mats soft beneath your steps, the shoshi screens filtering light into a pearly haze. She kneels beside a low chest, opening drawers filled with silken sashes, brushes, and tiny packets tied with string. Within each packet is a powder ground herbs, dried petals, shavings of fragrant woods carefully chosen not only for scent but for effect. One pouch she opens releases a cloud of cinnamon. She dips her fingers into it and presses the powder along the inside of her wrist. Then, in a gesture both delicate and deliberate, she lifts her wrist to her lips and blows softly, sending the scent drifting across the room. Her guest, reclining on a cushion, inhales unconsciously, his eyes following her every move. She smiles faintly, the kind of smile that is both an invitation and a challenge. From another pouch, she takes clove, rolling the spice between her fingertips until the oils glisten. She then brushes those same fingertips along the rim of her guest's cup, before pouring tea. When he lifts it, he tastes not only the bitterness of green tea, but the warmth of spice, and he imagines it is her hand he is drinking from. The courtesans of Edo were trained not only in music and poetry, but in the precise use of gesture. Watch how she adjusts her kimono, slowly sliding the sleeve down her arm as though by accident, the fabric pooling to reveal skin pale against crimson silk. She pretends to notice only after his eyes do, pulling the sleeve back into place with a coy laugh. Yet her hand lingers at the knot of her sash, fingers tracing the silk in a way that seems to invite his imagination further than her body allows. Every action is deliberate theater. When she leans forward to refill his cup, her hair brushes his cheek like a whisper. When she writes a poem for him with her brush, she tilts the paper toward him just enough that her hand rests against his as she steadies the page. The powder and perfume give the air its flavor, but it is the choreography of her movements that ensnares him. You see her reach once more into the chest, pulling a pouch filled with crushed camellia petals. She dusts them lightly over her collarbone, then smooths her hand across the skin as though erasing the evidence. But her hand moves slowly, sensually, drawing his eyes to the path of her fingertips. She glances at him, catching his gaze, and lets the corner of her mouth curl upward. He believes he is under a spell, and in a way, he is. Outside, the streets hum with life drums from a festival, voices of merchants. Yet in this chamber, time slows. The courtesan places her hand gently on the guest's shoulder, leaning close as though to whisper. She does not whisper anything of importance, only a passing comment about the weather. But her lips brush so near his ear that the words dissolve into sensation. He nods, lost, convinced that the powders are working, when it is her nearness, her warmth, her deliberate pauses that undo him. And you realize, as you sit quietly in the corner, that the secret was never in the pouches alone. Cinnamon and clove, camellia and incense, they are notes in a song. But the melody is her touch along his arm, her breath against his cheek, the calculated tilt of her head. Like the finest performers of a no stage, she knows that every silence, every pause, is as potent as the sound itself. You rise at last, stepping out into the cool Edo night. The lanterns sway in the breeze, and the scent of clove clings faintly to your sleeve. Behind you, the courtesan continues her dance of gestures, weaving powder and touch into a potion far more enduring than any brew. And you carry with you the lesson of her art. That desire lies not only in what is given, but in what is withheld, in the fleeting brush of a hand, in the powder that lingers long after the courtesan has gone. You wake to the sound of water lapping against stone and the scent of roasting maize. Dawn spills pink across the canals of Tenochtitlan. Temples gleam, causeways stitch the lake. Canoes drift by with baskets of squash blossoms and marigolds. Here, love doesn't arrive in a vial. It arrives in a gourd cup, capped with storm gray foam bitter as a secret, bright with spice, and perfectly capable of keeping the whole city awake to think about it. At the market of Tlatelolco, traders call out the price of cacao beans with the same reverence they give jade. The beans jingle in woven sacks. They are currency and promise both. 100 ways to warm the heart and keep eyelids open at inconvenient hours. At a stall shaded with mats, a woman grinds roasted cacao on a metate, the stone humming beneath her rhythm. She stirs in cool water, a thread of vanilla orchid syrup, and a pinch of ground chili, then lifts a painted vessel high and pours the liquid back and forth until a thick cap of foam forms like a low cloud. She tips the gourd and watches the bubble-dark surface settle, satisfied. She works with the measured grace of a priestess. The foam matters. Here the foam is the spell made visible. The fragrance is earthy and electric, as if the soil itself were awake. She notices you watching and smiles. This is not the sweet comfort of modern cocoa. This is zocoletl, the bitter drink that keeps warriors marching and poets reciting at midnight, which is to say it complicates love in the most helpful way. A young warrior, dust still on his sandals from the causeway, steps to the stall. The woman call her Itzalets, the foam kiss the rim, then lifts a fingertip of froth and touches it gently to his lower lip, as if sealing a promise there. He tries to look stern, fails, laughs. Her laugh answers, low and warm, the sound of someone who knows exactly what she is doing and is in no hurry. He drinks. The first taste is thunder, bitter cacao, a lick of chili, the ghost of vanilla, like a memory of flowers. His eyes sharpen as if a temple drum has started in his chest. Itzel places her palm over the back of his hand where it grips the cup. She does not hurry, her fingers simply rest there, warm and unarguable, telling a story older than the city itself. When he lowers the gourd, she draws one slow line of foam along his cheekbone, war paint, rewritten as tenderness, then wipes it away with the pad of her thumb, letting that touch linger a fraction longer than necessary. You've seen the pattern elsewhere, honey, by canals, lotus oil and courtyards. Clove on tatami, but here the spell carries a brighter charge. The cacao wakes the blood. The chili urges it forward. Yet the mixture alone is nothing without choreography. The real potion is in the timing, the pause before the sip, the steady gaze over the rim, the fingertips that arrive and refuse to leave first. Itzel leans in as if to say something private about the weather. Her breath warms the space near his ear. The words themselves hardly matter. He nods as though he's heard an oracle. Cacao here is sacred and ordinary, currency and comfort, ritual and rumor. Priests bless it, merchants count it, lovers borrow it, like a line from a song. In whispered stories, Quetzalcoatl brings cacao to humankind, a gift so precious it must be shared with care. Care, in this context, looks like Itzel's hands. She crushes a blossom of flor de cacao between her fingers. Its quicksilver scent vanishes almost at once, so she moves closer before it fades, letting the fragrance and her breath arrive together. She lifts the warrior's free hand and traces a small circle in his palm, as if sketching the lake's horizon for him alone. You think of earlier recipes, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from Egypt, wisely kept far from drinking cups, and quietly thank every god available that this one is delicious in its sharp way. There is gentle irony in calling it a love potion. Really, it is a wake-up charm with romantic side effects. Sleepless devotion is both the promise and the warning label. An older couple arrives, hands wrinkled from years of weaving. The woman has ground her cacao herself, humming a tune the stones remember. She adds a dusting of achiote, turning the drink the color of sunset. Before her husband sips, she taps the bottom of his cup twice. Tiny ritual, then smooths a thumb along his eyebrow, as if fixing a thread that isn't there. He smiles with his whole face. He drinks, and she rests her hand on his chest, just long enough to feel the steady drum within, then lets her palm drift to his jaw, where she tips his chin with affectionate command. They laugh softly, like people who decided long ago that devotion is simply attention practiced daily. Stories in the market, whisper of stronger brews, cacao thickened with maguey sap, mixed with crushed flowers whose names are kept behind the teeth. Itzel knows those recipes, but she prefers the simple measures, the ones that let her hands do the louder work. When the warrior empties his cup, she turns the gourd in her palm and draws a spiral in the condensation. When he looks down, she lifts that same fingertip and completes the spiral on his skin, a mark that vanishes as quickly as it appears. He watches the place where it was and seems, for a blink, convinced that something permanent has been written there. Across the plaza, a poet declaims something about jogger hearts. Children chase one another between pyramids of tomatoes. A heron stalks the canal, patient as time. Life goes on, full of barter and birdsong. And yet the little theater at Itzel's stall feels like the city's truest center, foam rising and collapsing. Gourd cups changing hands, touches landing with the gentlest certainty. A trader from the coast arrives, salt still on his skin, and asks for extra chili. Itzel obliges, flicking a fraction more into the bowl, then lifting the vessel high. The pour is steady. The foam climbs obediently. She offers the cup with both hands so that his fingers must overlap hers when he takes it. For a heartbeat, they share one pulse through a thin shell of gourd. He clears his throat, tries to be sensible, and fails. She steadies the cup for him, and, While doing so, straightens a bead at his collar with the back of her knuckle, as if arranging merchandise rather than rearranging a heartbeat. You could bottle this skill if you could bottle timing. You could write it like a recipe: add cacao, water, chili, and a perfectly chosen pause, but you know better now. The potion is an alibi for bravery. It gives cover to the gesture, permission to linger. And linger itself does, a wrist gliding lightly along a forearm as she counts out change in beans, a palm flattening a crease at a shoulder. A last crescent of foam touched to the corner of a mouth like a signature. Around her, the market brightens into noon. Somewhere a priest sounds a conch shell. Somewhere a canoe bumps gently against a landing, the lake sighing as if pleased with itself. You step back from the stall with bitterness and heat ringing on your tongue, phantom drink brewed from watching others drink. The lesson is simple and extravagant at once. Cacao is the stage, chili the drumbeat, vanilla the memory, and touch the spell. Tonight, when the city sleeps well, sleeps might be optimistic, you will remember the lip salted with foam, the fingertip spiral, the way a gourd cup became a lantern in its soul's hands. And as the night hums on bright-eyed and tender, you'll realize that sleepless devotion was never the danger, it was the point. The lake-bright markets of Tenochtitlan dim behind your eyelids, and when you open them again, the air is thinner, brighter, edged with cold. Mountains rise like sleeping gods. Terraces ring the hills in patient ladders. Water glitters in narrow canals. The stone heart of Cusco beats softly under your sandals. Here, devotion is measured in footsteps, climbed, and in bowls lifted to the sky. The brew is chicha-maize coaxed into sweetness by breath and time, and the ceremony belongs to both love and weather. Because in this empire every promise is made twice, once to the person before you, and once to the mountains watching. You follow a path into a courtyard, where clay jars or bolos with tapering tips lean in a circle, warm from the sun. Women are at work. They rinse maize kernels, sprout them, chew them to begin the slow translation of starch into sugar, then dry and grind, laughing at the way the wind steals chaff and returns it to their hair. The scent is clean and grain sweet. The sound is the hush of stirring paddles and the faint steady music of a quena, somewhere beyond the walls. One woman, call her Kila, named for the moon, kneels beside a jar and tests the brew with a carved spoon. She is practiced, her shoulders strong from carrying water, her wrists sure from 1,000 circles of stirring. The chicha has turned cloudy gold. She smiles, satisfied, and covers the mouth of the jar with a cloth scented by crushed contuta blossoms. This batch will be poured tonight in a small rite for rain and for a promise of another kind. You recognize the pattern from every place you've been. The recipe is the stage. The person is the play. The evening brings music and thin stars. A pututo, a conked horn, sounds from the hillside like a question for the sky. People gather near a waka, a sacred stone, and lay coca leaves in careful fans. Kila lifts a pair of drinking cup scarrows, their walls painted in bright geometry. One she fills for the earth, the other, for the man who has been pretending not to look at her for months. When she tips a little chicha to the ground chela, a libation the dirt drinks with quiet appetite. For Pachamama, someone murmurs, and then the second cup waits like a held breath. He is their tupa, with wind in his hair from the terraces, hands nicked by tools, eyes that keep finding hers and then finding the horizon to be safe. Kila approaches without hurry. The crowd is only half watching. They are busy with prayers for rain, with songs that lean into the valley. She holds the cup with both hands, turning it so the painted pattern catches firelight. When he reaches to take it, she does not simply let go. She lets his fingers slide beneath hers, skin to skin along the wood, and keeps them there long enough for him to notice. He lifts the cup. Foam beads at the rim like small stars. Kila waits close enough that her poncho grazes his forearm. When he drinks, a line of chicha glints on his lower lip. Before he can wipe it away, her thumb is there, light, deliberate, catching the drop and smoothing it into nothing. The gesture is reverent enough to pass for ritual, private enough to be understood as the thing it is. Chicha is a social drink, a weave of community. But pressed gently, it also becomes a quiet language between two people. Keela leans toward him as if to hear the quena more clearly. Her hair slips over her shoulder and brushes his wrist. He starts to speak something about the canals, the new seedlings, but his words tangle. She lowers her gaze, smiling, and with her free hand draws a small spiral in the condensation on the cup, echoing the spiral you once watched traced in Aztec foam. He follows the line with his eyes as if it were a path he might walk. The rite continues. Elders pour libations for the apis, the mountain spirits. Children scatter petals and chase them when the wind steals them back. Someone passes a bundle of coca leaves, and Tupa takes 3, tucks them in his cheek, and offers 3 to Keela. She chooses one, presses it to his palm, and with the nail of her smallest finger, draws a tiny cross where the lines of his hand meet, sealing an exchange older than the empire. Any reciprocity. Then, as if simply smoothing a wrinkle, she lets her hand travel up his forearm, over the coarse wool, and pause at the bend of his elbow and anchor point, disguised as courtesy. You remember the lotuses and oils, the cinnamon pouches and cacao foam, and you note the continuity with a sleepy smile. The ingredients shift with altitude, but the choreography holds. The pause, the glance, the touch that remains a heartbeat longer than manners require. If the Nile taught perfume and Athens taught laughter, the Andes teach steadiness, the patience of terraces and the faith of rain rituals. Chicha's power is not its strength, it is its warmth, its willingness to be shared, its habit of asking people to face one another and breathe the same air. Later, away from the songs, the two of them stand by a canal that mutters to itself like an elderly storyteller. Moonlight coins the water. Keela refills the cup and offers it again, but this time her palm covers his for the first sip. You feel the shared pulse through wood, the same trick Itzel used with a gourd. Now moved 1,000 miles and a world of mountains. When he lowers the cup, she reaches up, brushes a stray thread from his hairline, and leaves her hand there a moment longer than necessary. Thumb just at his temple, as if blessing a thought. She speaks finally. Something small, a comment about the cloud's shape over Sacsayhuaman, about the way the wind smells when rain is near. While she talks, her hand traces the line of his jaw, almost absent-mindedly, then returns to the cup and turns it in lazy circles, so the surface of Chicha mirrors the moon in ripples. He watches her hand as if the answer to weather and love alike might be written in those circles. A drop of rain lands on the back of Keela's hand. She looks up, laughing softly. It is barely a promise, but everyone in the valley will celebrate a promise. Tupa places his hand over that drop over her hand and, without letting go, tips a finger to the cup and daubs a shining bead at the hollow of her throat. The gesture is bolder than any he's made in months. She lets him, eyes bright, then covers his hand with hers and eases it away, not to refuse but to guide. The mountains are watching. So is your heart. The night thickens, songs wind down to hums. Somewhere a llama snorts, unimpressed by romance or meteorology. Keela sets the cup aside and, as she has learned from older women, places a coca leaf behind Tupa's ordinary gesture for luck, suddenly and unmistakably intimate. Her fingertips linger against the soft skin there. You see him close his eyes, the way people do when rain begins. You stand back as the valley exhales. The rite is small, the brew humble, the touch is few, and yet the air is different now, charged with a patience that belongs to terraces and to people who know how to wait without sleeping. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? You do, with gratitude for distance and for the way recipes have improved as the altitude changed. Here, nothing flamboyant is required. A cup lifted to the earth, another lifted to a mouth, a thumb at the lip, a leaf by the ear. Love and rain share a language. Both begin with a touch you could mistake for accident until the second drop falls. The terraces of the Andes dissolve into wide savanna light. You hear drums before you see anything else, low, steady, as if the land itself is breathing through leather. The air smells of wood smoke and dust, with a faint sweetness like overripe fruit. You are in the villages of West Africa, where healers sometimes called herbalists, sometimes whispered of as sorcerers tend, not only to fever and stomachache, but also to the secret aches of the heart. A small hut leans against the shade of a baobab tree, its trunk swollen like a library of seasons. Inside, gourds and clay pots hang from beams, each filled with leaves, roots, and powders the color of earth. A woman sits cross-legged on a woven mat. She grinds kola nut with patient force, the pestle rising and falling in rhythm with the drums outside. Powder sifts into a shallow bowl, reddish-brown, bitter and sharp with promise. To it, she adds, bark scraped from the baobab, dried petals of hibiscus, and a spoon of honey that gleams gold in the gloom. She is called a healer, but her real gift is in understanding not only the plants but the people. She knows when a young man comes asking for a potion to win affection, what he truly needs is courage to speak. And she knows when a woman seeks a charm to rekindle her husband's eyes. What she longs for is not magic, but permission to touch him again as she once did, without fear or shame. Tonight, she prepares such a potion for a girl named Amara. Amara arrives shyly, her bangles tinkling as she fidgets. She confesses her heart beats too quickly whenever a hunter from the neighboring village passes. The healer smiles knowingly, pours the powdered kola into a calabash, and adds water until it foams pale and bitter. She whispers words, not incantations so much as advice disguised as blessings. Let the hand linger. Let the eyes not dart away. The potion works only if you believe it is your courage. Amara leaves with the calabash, the liquid heavy in her hand. That night, when the drums echo across the clearing and the hunter rests by the fire, she offers him the drink, claiming it will steady his strength after the day's hunt. He accepts, grimacing at the bitterness, but swallowing anyway. And here is the true magic. While he drinks, she sits close, so close that her knee brushes his. Her fingers trace the rim of the calabash as he lowers it, then hesitant, daring her hand slides upward until her fingertips brush his jaw. He blinks, startled. She smiles, shy and radiant all at once. The kola may quicken his pulse, but it is her touch that holds him still. The potion is an excuse. Her fingers are the declaration. For the first time, she does not look away. The healer, sitting back in her hut, might smile to know her potion has worked exactly as intended, not by altering the hunter, but by emboldening Amara. Every secret recipe is really a vessel for courage, a way of giving someone permission to act on feelings they already carry. Other stories rise from the firelight. One tells of a wife who, after years of routine, asked the healer for a charm to bring back her husband's laughter. The healer gave her a pouch of hibiscus powder. She mixed it into his drink, then more importantly pressed the first sip against his lips with her own fingers, laughing at the sourness. Her laughter was contagious. Her hand lingered on his face, and soon the hibiscus was forgotten. The potion's name faded, but the memory of her touch stayed. You notice the continuity again, as you always do. The Egyptians had oils, the Greeks figs, the Aztecs cacao, and here the kola nut takes its turn. The ingredient shifts, but the choreography endures. The brushing of skin, the pause before pulling away, the courage to look steadily into someone's eyes. Outside, the drums rise. The hunter and Amara join the circle, her hand still resting lightly on his arm. He laughs now, not at the potion, but at the excuse it gave her to lean close, to place her hand where she never dared before. She laughs too, relieved, her bracelets chiming with each gesture. In the shadows, the healer grinds more roots, knowing her work will be called mystery, perhaps even witchcraft, by those who do not understand. But you, sitting quietly in the corner, see it clearly. The mystery is not in the bark or the nut. It is in the courage to touch, to linger, to laugh, to love. The potion is just the story people tell to explain why. Tonight, the world feels different. The drums of the savannah fade, replaced by the solemn toll of a bell. You now tread through a gray stone passage, the air damp with moss and wax smoke. It is a medieval castle in Europe, perched on a cold hill. In the kitchens below, broth simmers for soldiers, but somewhere higher, In the shadows of a scriptorium, monks bend over parchment with quills scratching, recording not only prayers but odd little notes about herbs and charms whispered by villagers. Officially, they write psalms. Quietly, they keep recipes for desire. One such recipe, a cup of warm wine mixed with powdered violet root and honey, sipped before bed. Another crushed nettle seed sprinkled into broth, believed to make the heart race faster, not unlike love itself. These scribbles are half medical, half magical, tucked between sermons, as if hidden from God's more severe gaze. Yet beyond cloisters, in the damp corners of castles, women weave their own charms. You follow a young lady of the court telling her gown trailing on cold flagstones. She clutches a small pouch sewn of velvet, filled with herbs, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage. A shred of parchment with her beloved's name inked in secret. She has been told by a nurse that if she sprinkles these into a goblet of wine and stirs with her own finger, his eyes will never wander. That night, in the flickering hall, she pours the wine, her knight broad-shouldered, still smelling of steel, and mood accepts it, without question. But the potion is not the true charm. It is the way she hands him the goblet, her fingers brushing his as though by accident. It is the way she lingers, standing close enough that her sleeve grazes his arm. He drinks, swallows, then looks at her hand, finds her already looking at him. Eleanor smiles faintly, lowering her gaze. She moves her hand to the table, then lets it wander across the wood until it rests against his gauntlet wrist. Slowly, carefully, she slides her hand upward, over cold iron, until she finds warm skin where his armor ends. The night shifts, his breath uneven, and suddenly, the hall seems quieter, the fire brighter. Was it the nettle seed in his cup, or the tremor of her touch? He does not ask, she does not answer. Elsewhere, in village cottages, women stir herbs into stews for their husbands. Sometimes with prayers, sometimes with only sighs. A wife sprinkles marjoram, believed to warm affection, then presses the spoon to her husband's lips, herself, holding it steady until he tastes. Her hand lingers too long, her eyes soften, and the herbs become nothing more than backdrop for her boldness. The church, of course, scowled at such practices, branding them superstition or worse. But the notes in the monks' manuscripts betray fascination. One margin reads, "A woman dipped her finger in his drink and drew a cross upon his forehead. He swore, his heart quickened." The monk copies the tale dutifully, pretending to condemn it, yet he writes down every detail of the gesture. Perhaps, you suspect, he understood more than he admitted. And so you see again the familiar pattern: recipes recorded, herbs gathered, prayers whispered, but always, always, the spell is sealed, not by ink or nettle or violet, but by touch, by the hand across the wrist, the thumb brushing a cheek, the pause before the gaze is broken. You wander the castle's stone halls once more, hearing the laughter of nobles, the clatter of cups, the rustle of gowns. Somewhere, Eleanor and her knight sit closer than before, the goblet forgotten between them. The potion, officially, has worked. But you know the truth. The nettle seeds and parchment scraps are only props. The true enchantment is the hand that dared to climb over iron, the courage hidden in her soft smile. And as the bell tolls midnight, echoing through damp stone, you drift onward, carrying the scent of rosemary and the sound of a night's uneven breath into the next chapter of longing. You blink, and the stone chill of the castle softens into the honeyed light of a Renaissance morning. Florence hums like a well-tuned lute, bells hoofbeats, a painter arguing with a patron about whether angels need ankles. In a narrow lane, above a goldsmith's shop, a small room glows with amber glass. Here, bottles stand like a choir, orris root steeped in wine, rose attar cupped in wax, a curl of lemon zest floating like a tiny moon. This is a perfumer's bottega, and the air is a manuscript you read with your nose. Violet, citrus, a rumor of musk that pretends to be respectable. You watch a woman step inside, veil lifted, gloves tucked under her arm. Call her Isabella. She is no queen, no scandal etched into history. She is the kind of woman history often misplaces, which is a pity, because she understands messages better than the printing press. The perfumer bows, produces a jar labeled orris, another marked viola, and a small vial of something sea-sweet that sailors whisper about when the wind is slack. Isabella chooses with care. She wants a letter to say what her mouth cannot yet. The perfumer warms oil in a spoon over a lamp until the scent rises like a shy spirit. He dips a linen ribbon, draws it out glistening, and hands it to Isabella. She presses the ribbon between her gloved palms, then touches those palms to the edges of a folded page, tracing a border of fragrance you cannot see. The ink she uses today is ordinary gall and iron, but into the well she has crumbled a pinch of violet sugar. The apothecary swore would carry notes of spring wherever it traveled. When the nib scratches, the whole room smells faintly of violets reading over her shoulder. She writes slowly. Not poetry. She has learned that men lose their place in couplets, but a careful geography of longing, the color of the Arno at dusk, the way the loggia swallows sound when you stand at its heart, the taste of quince paste on the tongue he offered her last week as if it were nothing. Between sentences, she heats a drop of rose oil on her fingertip and rubs it along the fold where the paper will kiss itself. The gesture is precise, priestly, playful. You feel the tug of memory. Lotus oil on a collarbone in Egypt, clove on a kimono sleeve in Edo, cacao foam painted like war paint in Tenochtitlan. Different centuries, same courage. When she sands the page, she breathes on the words, a warm fog that leaves the letters shining for a heartbeat. If you were sentimental and tonight, you might say the letter is learning her breath, the way a cup learned Itzel's hands. She turns to the candle, melts a coin of scarlet wax, and lets it pool on the flap. Before pressing the seal, she lifts the signet and holds it near her lips, as if consulting it in private. Then she lowers it slowly, so slowly, the wax accepting the emblem like a promise. The fragrance climbs again, rose, violet, a hint of citrus brightness that feels like sunlight, even indoors. You might think the letter is the whole plot. It is only the stage. The true performance is in the delivery. Isabella steps into the day, arranging her veil, then ups gloves. She takes them to the window, brushes a whisper of orris across the wrists, then slips them on. Glove leather will hoard a scent for days. Catherine in France will make a dynasty of this trick. Isabella only needs an afternoon. At the loggia, the world is painted with shadow and marble. He waits there. Call him Marco, pretending to read a ledger. The universal Renaissance camouflage for a beating heart. Isabella approaches as if to pass by, then slows, as if remembering a trivial errand. She removes one glove with a precision that belongs on a stage, a little tug at each finger so the leather releases her hand like a lover who knows he must. She holds the folded letter between two ungloved fingers and raises it too high, so he must reach. When he does, she lets their fingertips meet along the paper's edge. The contact is as slight as a vow and twice as binding. He frowns at first, because men trained by ledgers always frown at things they cannot tally. But when he breaks the seal, the loggia fills with a small, invisible orchestra, Violet reading vowels, Rose humming on the paper's spine, Orris walking in wearing expensive shoes. He lifts the page and the scent moves with the words, this line a breath of citrus, that phrase a ribbon of powdery root. You see the moment it happens. The letter ceases to be paper and becomes presence. Isabella, gracious, stands near his shoulder, as if ready to answer a practical question about deliveries or dates. She points, lightly, to a sentence, her fingertip brushing his knuckle as she does. He stumbles over a word. Loggia becomes longing and she does not correct him. Instead, she leans a fraction closer, letting the orris from her glove drift up like a patient herald. The perfume does not assault, it invites. He inhales by accident. The best way to learn anything. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen, and thank the century again for progress. Here, the chemistries are kind. Orris root smells like violets remembering rain. Rose is the softest headline. The sea-sweet vial, if Isabella used it, is so quiet it speaks only at the border of thought. And still, none of it would matter without the choreography. When Marco's eyes lift from the page, she is already watching him with the steady attention of a sculptor sighting true. Her free hand rises as if to adjust a stray thread near his collar, but finds his jaw instead. The touch is gentle, more editing than caressant. Her thumb makes a small, absent circle just below his cheekbone, exactly where the letter's rosa scent has settled. He laughs softly, as men do when something serious arrives, wearing a joke. Perfumed letters, he says, pretending to scold. A conspiracy. She answers in the only language that survives every age. Her hand remains where it is, one heartbeat longer than manners require. Then withdraws, as if resisting. The page trembles just slightly in his grasp. Renaissance gossip swears by bolder recipes: clove-studded oranges hidden in sleeves, lemon rubbed on lips to make a kiss taste like a bell ringing. Isabella knows them all. She prefers simplicity. She asks the letter to do the announcing so her hands can do the convincing. When he folds the page again, uncertain where to look, she takes it back without asking, turns it, and tucks it into his doublet herself. Her knuckles graze his chest, flat and sure. If he had a heartbeat before, now he has a drum. Later, when the city leans toward evening, he will reread her words. The violet will still be there, a faint echo. He will find Rose at the fold and remember her thumb completing an invisible sentence on his face. He will press his nose to the paper and pretend to look for a smudge of ink, just long enough to let memory do the rest. If he sleeps at all, it will be in the lightest way, like a man guarding treasure he has not named aloud. You step back into the lane, amused at how a page outperforms a potion, but of course it isn't the page. It is the way a letter lets a hand be brave, the way fingers meet over paper, the way a seal becomes an excuse to linger, the way a fold holds a fragrance, the way a palm holds heat. Different tools, same theater. You could say the Renaissance perfects the user interface, a velvet upgrade from nettle seeds and barn flasks. The notification is sent. The haptic feedback is touch. The content is everything she didn't write, and still managed to say. Remember the spiral drawn in cacao foam, the cross traced with nettle-slick fingers. Tonight the mark is a thumb's slow circle beneath a cheekbone, signed in rose. The city exhales. Painters wash their brushes. Merchants lock their chests. Somewhere a poet insists that love is geometry. You smile, because you have seen its truer mathematics. Ink plus perfume plus a hand that refuses to rush. A simple sum, solved in the margins where history keeps its most useful arithmetic. You trade the ink-stained quiet of Florence for corridors that glitter like a necklace unwound at noon. Versailles breathes perfume. Floors, mirror shoes, chandeliers multiply candles into constellations, and everywhere, silk rustles like leaves. You move through the hall of mirrors at a bedtime pace, because at this court even whispers wear heels. Here, the love potion has a fan in one hand and a lawsuit in the other. It is rumor steeped in civet, gossip perfumed with ambergris, and if you believe the more theatrical pamphlets, a dash of danger stowed in a bodice. Perfumers press their wares on courtiers, glove leather softened with orange flower and neroli, sachet savoris, jasmine, and clove, pomanders that promise to fend off plague and boredom, though not always in that order. Chocolate has arrived from Spain and finds a second throne in the king's apartments, thick, spiced, poured hot into porcelain its steam, another kind of perfume. Invigorating, the physicians declare. Indiscreet, the poets add. Meanwhile, glove makers, who double as perfumers, smile quietly. Chemistry pays better than poetry. You pass a salon where ladies practice a small magic trick invented for fans. Open, flutter once, and the ribs release a sigh of scent, orange blossom, perhaps, or something darker if the lady trades in scandal. Close, pause, and the perfume is an envelope nobody can read without stepping closer. Across the room, a marquise snaps her fan shut with soft authority, then slips it open again for a single man who is trying very hard not to be obvious. He fails. Everyone at Versailles fails in exactly this way sooner or later. You hear names as you walk. Montespan, Maintenon, La Voix Santa, latter spoken with the sideways. Glance people reserve for thunder that has already passed but might remember its way back. The affair of the poison still haunts these galleries, a cautionary tale told with lace at the cuffs. Love filters, the pamphlets warned, could slide from harmless into harmful, with only a pinch of Candorada's Spanish fly. That glittering, dangerous mistake that turns desire into fever, and fever into gossip that never cools. You keep the tone soft, because this is a sleep story, but the breeze does carry a lesson. Potions can be reckless. The wiser courtiers prefer theater to chemistry. Watch one now. She moves through a card room with the serene gravity of a ship under full sail. Call her Helene. Her gown is the blue of midnight, pretending to be respectable. Around her throat, a simple ribbon scented with a breath of amber, note that feels like warmth learned to speak. In her hand, a handkerchief stitched with silver forget-me-nots and dabbed with tincture of rose. She does not wave it. She lets it rest along her palm as if it were merely decoration. Her Markno, her companion for the evenings, a duke whose conversation tends to troop reviews. She prefers to talk about clouds. They meet halfway. Helene drifts near his shoulder at the gaming table, leans just close enough that her sleeve brushes his cuff, and concerns herself with his luck. He is losing, which helps. She folds the handkerchief into a small triangle and, as she offers a consoling suggestion about switching seats, lays the linen lightly across the back of his hand. A pause. Then, with her index finger, she smooths the cloth once, twice, as if ironing fate directly into his skin. He inhales rose and amber, but mostly her end looks up. You recognize the choreography from every century behind you. The touch that lingers a heartbeat. The eyes that hold steady. The accident planned in advance. Helene is not reckless. She does not traffic in beetles powdered into bravado. She works in microtheater. When the Duke wins a small hand, she applauds softly, and when she withdraws the handkerchief, she lets her fingertips trail along his knuckles, completing the line she began. He laughs, because men at cards always laugh at the moment they notice they are playing something else. Versailles adores props. Pomanders swing at waists, little apples of gilded filigree filled with herbs and musk. Helene's is quite a sphere, with windows of fretwork. She opens it in passing, as if checking the time, and the tiniest breath of clove escapes. Clove, you think of Ito's courtesans dusting their wrists, of cinnamon blown across a tatami. The hallway suddenly feels narrower. She clasps the pomander shut, then steadies it against the Duke's sleeve as if to still its swing. The back of her hand rests on his forearm. She does not hurry. A fan clicks somewhere like a cricket agreeing. A smaller salon hums with chocolate cups. Steam writes lazy script in the air. Helene takes one and stirs with a sliver of vanilla bean pure theater. The real flavor was decided in the kitchen. The Duke stands beside her. Too rich, he claims. Too late, she replies. She lifts the cup to his mouth not to feed him, exactly, but to test his sense of permission. He accepts. A crescent of chocolate touches his lip. Before he can reach for a napkin, she corrects the smear with the pad of her thumb. A gesture halfway between etiquette and confession. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen history's worst moisturizer, and give thanks for this century's upgrades. Versailles may flirt with cantharides, but in rooms that stay written into memory, the true filter is civility rehearsed as intimacy. Helene returns the cup to its saucer, and lets her free hand perform the smallest repair. A braid displaced, a ribbon slightly out of line on the Duke's cuff. She smooths, adjusts, and, while adjusting, draws the back of her knuckle along his jaw, as if confirming he is carved correctly. The motion is administrative. The effect is not. Rumor whistles by in a powdered wig. Sermons about black masses. Shelves of bottles hidden behind lace curtains, wax figurines pierced with pins. You let the rumor pass. Sleep prefers the gentler truths. Glove leather and orange blossom. A handkerchief folded like strategy. A thumb that edits a mouth into readiness. Even the king knows, though he would not say it aloud, that a steady gaze accomplishes what chemistry only advertises. At a window niche, the light gentles. Helene and the Duke step aside from the traffic of brocade. She rests her palm against the cold pane, then lifts his hand to meet it, skin to glass on either side. Their reflections braid, a quiet illusion more convincing than any pamphlet filter. "See," she murmurs, breath fogging the joined prints. The mirror approves. He smiles like a man discovering geometry in a chandelier. She draws a tiny spiral in the fog. "Yes, that spiral. The one you first watched in cacao foam," and he watches his breath erase it, eager to make another. "There are darker shelves at court, and you nod to them in passing, because history insists. A certain abyss of perfumes sells vials that bite. A candlelit mass somewhere forgets what candles are for. But most hearts won here are won by timing, not toxins. The women who endure understand stagecraft, perfume as prelude, chocolate as chorus, touch as the single violin that makes the room listen." As the hour tilts toward candle snuffers, Helene reclaims the handkerchief, folds it again, and presses it into the Duke's pocket herself. Her knuckles flatten momentarily against his chest paper, becoming presents, like Isabella's letter in Florence. "For luck," she says, and it is an alibi both can accept. When he bows, she does not curtsy fully. She steps close instead, so his bow becomes a pretext to breathe her in. The room approves, in the way Versailles approves anything, by pretending not to notice while noticing everything. You leave the corridor with a lesson for soft places behind your eyelids. Dangerous filters make fierce headlines but poor lullabies. The court's most reliable potion is still the one you have tracked across empires. A practiced pause, a steady eye, a hand that takes its time smoothing a ribbon, correcting a smear, drawing a spiral that vanishes just quickly enough to require drawing again. Versailles only gilds the edges, amber in the ribbon, vanilla in the cup, mirrors to multiply the moment. The spell, as ever, is touch rehearsed as destiny. You awaken to fog that smells faintly of coal and boiled sugar. London hums like a kettle left slightly too long on the hob. Posters bloom along brick walls, typography shouting in curlicues. Dr. Hartwell's amorous restorative, Cupid's cordial tonic for courting. Guaranteed or your affections returned. You smile into your scarf. The Victorians invented many things: strains, photography, an enthusiastic relationship with lace, and also the industrial scale bottling of hope. Hope, as it turns out, is often suspiciously green. You duck beneath a striped awning into an apothecary, half real, half theater. Glass bottles march in ranks along mahogany shelves. Emerald liquids, raspberry syrups, amber bitters that catch the gaslight and pretend to be sunsets. The clerk polishes a bell that already gleams. He recites ingredients with grave authority: balsam of Toulouse, tincture of Damiana, a whisper of cantharides you lift an eyebrow, and invigorating essences that sound like a sermon trying to become champagne. The labels promise vigor, tranquility, and other mutually exclusive states. A young woman, Clara, stands at the counter with a folded advertisement in her glove. She has read it so often, the paper has learned her perfume. She points to Cupid's cordial, the green one, of course. Green sells the way spring sells, and asks, in a voice that wants to be practical, whether it is quite safe. The clerk assures her that it is entirely botanical, a phrase that covers a multitude of sins, including alcohol strong enough to turn a hymn into a reel. Clara buys a small bottle and tucks it into her reticule like a secret vowel. You follow her home to a drawing room where the coal grate ticks as if warming its hands. She sets the cordial on a tray beside cups and a plate of seed cake. Tonight, Mr. Ashdown is an earnest man whose hair thinks it is a metronome, precise and slightly too shiny. Clara rehearses in the mirror, the way courtesans in Edo rehearsed sleeves, the way Keela in the Andes rehearsed libations. She will not pour too much. She will not rely on quackery. She will use the cordial as a prop, a small green alibi for her courage. When Mr. Ashdown arrives, she offers tea, first respectable, then the cordial, adventurous. The liquid catches the lamplight and glows like a fairy disagreeing with a cucumber. He hesitates, and she smiles. The kind of smile that borrows light from a flame and gives it back brighter. "Only a thimble," she says. decanting a drop into his cup. As she passes it, her gloved fingers slide along the porcelain to meet his. The contact is gentle but deliberate. He imagines the cordial working. You know the touch has already clocked in for the night shift. He sips. The cordial tastes of mint, sugar, and decisions made hastily at a patent office. He coughs, laughs, apologizes, and Clara laughs too. The laugh that reaches out and arranges you kindly even if you are a teaspoon. She leans forward to add milk, ignoring the fact that cordial and milk are not on speaking terms. While she leans, the pearl button at her glove catches the light. She unbuttons it, as if it were an architectural inconvenience. The glove loosens, her wrist appears. The bare skin feels louder than all the city's omnibuses. She removes the glove finger by finger, the leather releasing with tiny sized. Victorians are experts at making a glove removal more dramatic than a duel. Now ungloved, Clara reaches to adjust Mr. Ashdown's tie, which is already adjusted. Her fingertips skate along the silk, then pause just below his throat, where pulse and collar conspire. Quite secure, she murmurs. He swallows. The tie agrees. She withdraws her hand slowly, letting her knuckle brush the edge of his jaw in an edit so delicate even a strict editor would allow it. Quack remedies thrive because people wish. Theater thrives because people watch. Clara understands both. She pours herself the faintest measure more for symmetry than chemistry and taps her glass to his. The tap is soft, a private bell. When she drinks, she closes her eyes for exactly 1 heartbeat longer than necessary. He watches the blink and thinks it means something. It does, though not what the label promised. Out in the streets, vendors bark miracle cures from painted carts, magnetic elixir, phrenological filter. A man in a stovepipe hat holds forth on animal electricity, while his accomplice cranks a device that looks like chastity having second thoughts. A cluster of listeners sway, as if convinced, or dizzy. You drift on a music hall where a comic sings about Lydia Pinkham while winking at the pit. A penny dreadful stall promising the poisoner of Pimlico. A spiritualist parlor where someone sells bottled moonlight distilled gin under a blue label. The century is drunk on improvement. It will sip anything with a flourish. Back in the drawing room, the cordial glows lower in the bottle. Clara sets it aside. Now she uses the object that never fails. Her hands. She reaches for a book on the table. Tennyson, The Universal Solventant, opens to a dog-eared page. May I read? She asks. Already reading. Her voice turns the room into felt. As she speaks, she turns the book so they share the page, their shoulders nearly touching. When she points to a line, her finger rests on his knuckle, and remains light pressure. Long pause until the line finishes the work she started. The cordial did its best. It surrendered sweetness, lent courage a color. But the true tonic is touch. She knows this, because her nurse told her, and because women teach one another what labels forget to print. She sets the book aside and, as if smoothing out the fabric of the evening, lays her palm briefly against his cheek. It's the old choreography, familiar as a hymn. Linger, meet the eyes, retreat as if reluctant. He follows the retreat with his gaze, a trained man chasing an untrainable moment. You catch a whiff of arsenical green from someone's wallpaper down the street. The century's least restful design choice, and think again of crocodile dung sunscreen. Every age has its regrettable chemistries. But doesn't the same age also refine gesture into art? Even at the quackery's height, etiquette tutors remind girls to hold gloves by the fingertips, to pass cups with steady wrists, to rise slowly so skirts breathe like small theaters. The patent medicine sells a shortcut. The body remains the road. Mr. Ashdown clears his throat twice. The Victorian Maxima man says something proper about the weather's improvement. Clara lets the topic pass like a well-behaved carriage. She rises to light another lamp, and as she passes his chair, her hand lands softly on his shoulder, an anchor disguised as balance. The touch contains exactly 1 heartbeat more than physics requires. If he slept through everything else, that heartbeat would wake him. He does not sleep. He looks up. Later, when he leaves, He carries the faint taste of mint and the clearer memory of a hand steadying his neckcloth. The street exhales fog, hooves tick like polite metronomes. He pauses beneath a lamp and smiles into nothing in particular. At home he will place his hat on the wrong peg and forgive himself. He will tell himself the cordial worked. He will be correct, but not in the way he thinks. The bottle didn't persuade him. It permitted her. In her room, Clara returns the green liquid to a drawer, with other keepsakes: a dried violet, a folded menu, a ribbon that remembers waltzes. She flexes her bare hand, watching the lamplight move across the knuckles that did the real work. She laughs once, quietly, at the label's promises, then blows out the flame. The room holds the echo of her laugh the way perfumes hold a last note. You step back into the fog, which wears the city like a shawl. Posters glimmer damply. Somewhere, a barker sells a bottle that contains half courage and half deceit. You have learned to recognize the ratio. Remember the spiral traced in cacao foam, the thumb that edited a lip in Versailles, the coca leaf tucked behind a man's ear in Cusco. Tonight, the mark is a fingertip pressed to a tie, permission poured from a glove, and a page shared until two pulses agree on a meter. The cordial will fade. The gestures will not. Dust lifts as the painted wagon rattles into town, promises lettered so large even the prairie can read them. A fiddle saws, applause arrives on schedule, and a stovepipe hat introduces snake oil Purovital amatory distilled, he swears, from rattlesnakes milked at dawn and steeped with sarsaparilla cayenne, and a secret herb known only to grandmothers and coyotes. Bottles glow, ruby, topaz, and that suspicious green that always tastes like trouble disguised as peppermint. You know the cast: barker, shill, drummer boy, crate for a stage. But you watch someone else, May, hat brim tilted, one hand holding her waist as if keeping her courage from spilling. She has ridden 2 hours on a wagon that laughed at roads, and coins knock softly in her pocket like tiny volunteers. She buys a bottle, not for magic, but for an alibi. Courage wears labels here. It helps to have something to hold. The cork opens with a polite pop and releases wintergreen camphor, and a handshake from peppermint so firm it is practically advice. The shill faints on cue, the crowd obliges. May steps away with her satchel and her plan. The saloon is amber and patient, the piano stubbornly faithful to E-flat. She orders sarsaparilla because it shares a syllable with bravery, practices a line in the mirror, and loses it when Eli walks in dust on his boots, seed catalogs folded in his pocket like love letters to the soil. She remembers the choreography you have watched from Sumer to Versailles: prop first, courage second, touch third. She sets the bottle on the table. For your shoulder, she says. He strained it, mending fence and adds, almost whispering, and for talking. He laughs, grateful. She tips 2 drops onto her fingertip, hesitates, then chooses the hollow below his ear, instead of the proffered forearm. The mint bites, her finger smooths the sting into calm. When she lifts her hand, she trails her touch along his jaw. There is nothing in that bottle that can turn a heart. There never was. It is mostly alcohol, wintergreen, and confidence sold retail. But watch the timing. She moves her chair half an inch closer. Her knee discovers the underside of his provers. Her voice drops as if the saloon door closed twice. He drinks sarsaparilla, the way men pray when they have not been taught how. Outside, the wagon folds itself back into anonymity. Inside, May rests her palm on the back of his hand, the way a traveler rests a map before tracing a route. If you were counting, you would hear 3 beats, the same rhythm you heard under cacao foam and in rose-scented letters. Offer, touch, pause. He looks down, then up, then does not look away. The label promised vigor, but the bottle's true business is permission. May steadies. I came to buy this, she says, smiling at the foolishness and the courage in equal parts, and to try something older. She turns his hand, places a single drop in the center of his palm, and draws a small spiral there. Yes, that spiral. Traveling across centuries like a secret handshake learned by heart. He closes his fingers around the mark as if it might evaporate. Older works, he says, words sounding like wood joined, True. For a few bars, the piano remembers the melody, and the room agrees to be kind. She practices again, a thumb tucked under his jaw, a palm cupping his cheek, a pause that cannot be bottled. He exhales into her hand. She breathes the mint. Together they discover the frontier formula: 1 part honesty, 1 part timing, stirred by touch. The medicine show will claim other miracles as it rolls on. Knees mended, rheumatism humbled, bashfulness scolded into obedience. What it truly fixes is pacing. A drop gives pretext, a scent announces approach. The hand writes the sentence. Later, the bottle will live on a shelf beside flour and sugar like a domestic reliquary. On evenings when words knock calves out, whether sulking, fence wire singing its lonely song, May will uncap it, touch a dot to Eli's wrist, then cover it with her palm or her mouth, sealing scent beneath skin. He will smile like a man finding water where he only expected dust. The tonic will take credit. They will let it. It costs nothing to be generous with a story. Out in the street, a boy chases a hoop while the barker tips his hat to history and disappears in a tail of dust. You think of crocodile dung sunscreen with the fondness one reserves for bad ideas that taught good lessons. Every age sells shortcuts. Every heart learns the long road anyway. You have walked it. Saffron milk simmered patient in India. Ginseng steeped in a courtyard. Cacao spiraled into a gourd. Chicha lifted to mountains. Cola ground to drums. Letters perfumed into presents. A handkerchief folded like strategy. Different tools, same theater. Toward evening, the street turns honey-colored. Eli rises to hitch the team. May follows. When he fumbles the strap, she covers his hand with hers and does not hurry to let go. The horses recognize a cue. So do you. Wind crosses the grass with a rumor of rain and the proud echo of a salesman's claims floating one day behind his wagon. You carry forward the better advertisement. Winter green on warm skin. Coins traded for permission. The clean relief of a touch that tells the truth. They ride out together. The bottle clinks once and falls quiet between them like an obedient witness. May leans against him as the wagon takes the ruts, steadying herself with a palm against his ribs, then leaves it there for no reason except the oldest one. He nudges the reins and, without looking down, covers her hand with his. The prairie registers the moment in the only ledger it keeps, a shadow longer than the wagon. A hawk circling once, a fence line that finally runs straight. If tomorrow someone in town swears snake oil saved a marriage or started one, you will not argue. Let the bottle have its legend. You have watched the real recipe performed, a prop to hold, a scent to announce, a finger to write a spiral in the only ink that matters: heat. The salesman sells jars. The heart sells courage. The hand closes the deal. Out here, as everywhere you've drifted, the truth remains shy but steady. The person holding the bottle is the spell. Neon replaces prairie dusk, and you step into a city that hums like a hive. Espresso machines hissing, bicycle bells chiming, rain drafting soft signatures on awnings. The storefronts are Nubin bar chocolatiers, natural wine bars, apothecaries that sell adaptogenic powders in fonts that believe in themselves, but the choreography is ancient. You can hear Sumer in the honeyed lattes, Egypt in the perfume counters, Athens in the laughter that moves faster than the food, Tenochtitlan in the cacao that refuses to be merely sweet. You smile because history has changed its outfit, not its habits. And because you know the spell still runs on touch, timing, and a handful of edible alibis. Begin with chocolate. The shop is small, all marble and brass. The air dense with roasted cocoa nibs and the vanilla that lives between words. Behind the counter, a chocolatier tempers dark chocolate until it shines like a secret agreed upon. A woman waits at the end of the bar with a tasting flight, and when the man beside her hesitates at the 85%, she turns the square toward him with 2 fingers and keeps those fingers resting on his for a heartbeat. He tastes thunder, citrus, smoke. He also tastes the gentle pressure of her hand. A smudge lands at the corner of his lip. She corrects it with a Thumbijep's oil without the crocodile, then leaves her hand half raised as if listening for more flavors. He nods, suddenly fluent. Next, wine, a bar where the lights are patient and the music keeps its voice down. The sommelier pours a gamay that smells like cherries remembering rain. A woman takes the glass by the stem, spins it, watches the color. When she offers it to her date, she doesn't pass it. She guides his hand around the bowl, her palm covering his, their fingers finding a common grip. He inhales, raspberries. He says, bravely, crushed peonies. She counters, amused. She tucks a stray hair behind his ear with the same hand that placed the glass, and the aroma becomes an accomplice. The bottle will claim credit. The wrist that steadied his holds the patent. Somewhere the ghost of a Roman matron raises an approving brow over Lernian. Herbs enter by the side door, as they always do. Rosemary and basil at a farmer's market. Mint traveling like gossip in a paper cup of lemonade. You follow a couple under a tent where rain freelances as percussion. She breaks a rosemary sprig, rubs it between her fingers until the oils rise. Then takes his wrist as if to check a pulse and draws the scented fingers slowly across the inner skin where the bead answers. Camphor pine, a little theater, she says, and you hear a monk copying notes in a margin. He laughs and tries to return the favor with basil. She leans in, lets the leaves knock politely against her throat, and for a moment the whole market smells of patience. Elsewhere, a kitchen glows like a small galaxy. A pan sizzles, butter speaks in applause, and garlic sighs its honest truth. She grates dark chocolate into chili. The Aztec whisper then taps the spoon against the rim and tastes. Eyes closing for one culinary heartbeat longer than necessary. He stands beside her, pretending to be useful. She reaches, finds his collar, and straightens it without needing to. The motion drifts into a palm against his jaw. The old gesture you've traced through centuries. Needs salt, she murmurs, but the sentence is spoken to his skin. When the sauce lands on plates, he declares it perfect, and he isn't entirely wrong, though the reduction that mattered most was distance. Perfume counters remain temples with better lighting. A clerk in black offers paper strips like small flags and speaks of bergamot, iris, woods. A woman ignores the strips and sprays her wrist, waits, then takes the man's hand and presses it to the inside of her arm. Pulse, scent, skin, a Venn diagram that history keeps drawing. Green at first, he says, surprised, then warm. She doesn't answer. She only lets his fingers remain until the top notes decide they've made their point. In the reflection of glass, you see Isabella's letter, Helene's handkerchief, the Edo sleeves, all nodding from their frames. The bottle will go home with them. The memory already has. Tea is a gentler echo. In a quiet shop, steam floats like silk, learning to speak. She stirs honey into chamomile Sumer's gold with a modern bedside manner, then offers the cup with both hands so his must overlap hers. He sips. She studies his face over the rim as if divining weather. A crescent of foam clings. He lifts it with a fingertip and draws a spiralus, that spiral on the wooden table, then finishes it on his palm, where the steam can rewrite it into warmth. He laughs, drowsy already, the good kind of hypnosis. Somewhere a healer under a baobab nods in agreement. Even bars selling bitters, remember apothecaries, orange bitters gentian, wormwood the labels, whisper Latin. A bartender burns a twist of citrus. A woman catches the tiny spark between two fingers and brings it to his mouth with a grin. The drink tastes of life, like shoes learning to dance. She rests her hand on the back of his necklight. Brief, declarative, and the room agrees it was always that simple. Victorian patent bottles rattle faintly in a drawer, still green, still convinced. You pat them fondly and move on. No crocodiles tonight, only oranges and the old literacy of touch. And at last, the sidewalk wet, reflective, lit by signs that announce nothing history hasn't trialed already. Two people share a small umbrella. She walks on the street side, pulls him closer with a palm at his hip as a bus sends up a democratic wave. He's steadying, she guiding the choreography the Kama Sutra might have footnoted if it had thought about puddles. They stop beneath a tree and, because every tale needs a libation, Tip a few drops from their paper cups to the roots Pachumama, updated for municipal landscaping. They drink the rest. She places a sugar packet in his pocket the way Isabella tucked a letter into a doublet, then presses her knuckles flat against his chest to make sure it stays. The city considers applause, settles for rain. So the echoes continue. Chocolate that writes thunder on tongues, wine that teaches courage to glass, herbs that open quietly like doors that were never locked. You drift through them with the lazy expertise of a dreamer who has done the reading. The ingredients are good. The theater is better. If anyone asks how the spell is cast, you can list cacao percentages, grape varieties, aroma chemicals, but you will be kind and tell the real truth. A hand steadies a glass, a thumb edits a mouth, a spiral finds a palm. A pause grows long enough to be believed. The rest is garnish. You stand at the far edge of the map you have been walking, the ink drying behind your heels. Honey jars shine in the mind like small suns. Lotus oil still glows on a collarbone that is now moonlight. Figs and oysters clink like clever jokes in a Greek cup. Roman wine remembers an arm that learned to linger. 1,000 hands have shown you the same lesson in different languages. The recipe is the pretext. The gesture is the spell. The pause is the hinge where a door opens without a sound. You carry tokens from everywhere. Saffron threads that look like captured dawn. A sliver of ginseng that smells of mountain mornings. Clove dust that turns air into velvet. Cacao foam stiff enough to paint a warrior's cheek. Chicha's soft cloud in a wooden cup. Cola's bitter courage beating like a second drum under the skin. From Florence you kept a ribbon that still murmurs rose. From Versailles, a linen handkerchief folded into certainty. From London, a green label that promised too much and delivered just enough permission. From the frontier, a wintergreen trace shaped like a spiral in a palm. You put them in your pockets and find they weigh nothing. What weighs something is what you learned watching the woman who pressed her thumb to a lip and edited a mouth into readiness. The wife who traced a character on a husband's chest, as though writing his name where only the night could read it. The courtesan who let clove ride the edge of a cup and made a room obey silence. The market vendor who drew a spiral in foam and then drew it again on skin so the mark would remember how to breathe. Each taught you the same choreography with a different accent. You smile at the missteps along the way. Crocodile dung sunscreen may history keep that far from faces and drinks. Spanish fly with its glittering threats. Patent greens that stained more wallpaper than hearts. Even the errors hum a lullaby if you listen slowly. They teach you to choose theater over peril, patience over panic, touch over tincture. The best filter wears no label, only intention. Now, as the hour thins, you feel the story lower its lights. Streets empty. Markets fold their shade mats. Temples bank their coals. Somewhere, a monk finishes a margin note that will confuse a scholar 2 centuries from now. Somewhere a chocolatier wipes a final crescent from a counter and leaves it shining like a new moon. Somewhere a woman lifts 2 cups, one for the earth. One for the person beside her, hand spills a small sip to the roots because gratitude prefers to travel. You turn inward with them. The script becomes room, the room becomes bed. The bed becomes a small boat set on a lake where even the wind agrees to whisper. You can still feel a fingertip at your wrist, counting your pulse like a friendly librarian counts books in a quiet stack. You can still smell a ribbon warmed near a candle, hear a fan open and release one polite sigh of citrus. You can still see the letter being tucked into a doublet, the handkerchief sliding into a pocket like a coin with a secret date. These are the soft engines of the world. They run on breath. If you wanted to cheat a little, you could list ingredients as if you were cooking sleep, 2 measures of slow air. 1 palm resting where the heartbeat answers. A garnish of laughter left in from Athens. 3 petals of silence from any temple that will loan them. A clove's worth of courage, half a ribbon of rose. Stir clockwise, as the sister said, because sometimes ritual is just a way of pointing your mind toward the same star every night. But you have watched enough to know you do not need the list anymore. You know the taste by heart. You lie back. Your hands discover that old choreography of comfort. One settles near your throat, the other on your ribs where breath lifts and falls as if answering a distant drum. The room smells faintly of paper and warmth. Your pillow keeps the last of the day like a promise it intends to keep. Outside, rain performs the slowest applause. A bus-sized window remembers to be glass. Before you drift, you look once more along the route you walked. You wave to Sumer by the canal, to Egypt's garden where the moon painted oil into scripture, to Athens wiping a fig's sweetness from the thumb, to Rome pretending it was the wine when it was the hand, to the village cauldron where courage cooled in bowls, to saffron milk glowing like a lantern, to ginseng ticking like a clock fixed to kindness, to Edos leaves that knew how to speak in cloth, to cacao's thunder and chich's patience and cola's drum. You nod toward Florence with its scented sentences, Versailles with its practiced mirrors, London with its bright labels and brighter gloves, the wagon that knew permission on a winter-green breeze, the city that served chocolate with advice and wine, with balance and herbs with laughter. It is all the same story with different lighting. And then, as if a fan closes, you let the stage dim. Your breath lengthens. Your heartbeat, which has been an audience for 2 hours, stands, bows, and becomes the music instead. Every potion you met performs a final trick from your bedside. It dissolves, sweetly, into sleep. Settle now, soft shoulders, softer jaw. The night arranging itself the way a careful hand smooths linen, slow and a little proud of its neatness. Let your eyes float, lids heavy as velvet theater curtains easing down after the last bow. And feel how the world loosens its laces 1, 2, 3 until breath fits as easily as water in a cup. The street has become a thoughtful hush. The house remembers where you keep quiet. The bed is a small boat tied to a moonlit dock, rocking in a rhythm you do not have to steer. In this light, ingredients blur into comfort. The scent of something warm, the echo of a gentle room, the memory of fingers tracing that small spiral in your palm. A sign that simply means rest. You are allowed to drift. You are allowed to leave the ledger open and the questions unanswered. If a thought knocks, let it wait on the porch. The lamp is out, the host is sleeping. The party is tomorrow. Your pulse reads its favorite paragraph and closes the book. Each inhale gathers the good hush. Each exhale folds it neatly at the foot of the bed. Shoulders fall, the tongue softens. The eyes agree to be clouds. Imagine a window cracked just enough to borrow a weather of crickets and faraway rain. A promise that everything outside will carry on nicely without you. The room keeps watch. The night keeps time. You keep nothing except warmth. Now, the boat pushes from the dock and glides into a lake that knows your name only as a lullaby. Stars lower their voices. The shore steps back with a smile. You sink, safely, into the wide, quiet water of sleep. The oldest recipe, perfectly mixed, perfectly yours.